Alright, what's up guys? Jake with Legacy 4x4 here again, and today we're going to be working on the Bronco again, and we're going to be doing a custom exhaust on my 1990 Ford Bronco. So the Bronco already has an exhaust system. It's got one that goes from the headers down to the catalytic converters and then out, but it gets cut off at the cats. And so I want to have something that's going to give it a little bit more stable road manners, so to speak. It's going to make it sound a lot better, but it's going to get some of this exhaust fumes that I'm having out away from the passenger compartment. So right now it's cut right below the passenger compartment, and so what that means is that as you're driving, you can definitely smell the exhaust inside the cab. So I picked up a relatively cheap muffler from O'Reilly's. This is just one of their standard off-the-shelf ones that you can get over there. I'm going to run some exhaust tube, and we're basically going to just take it from where it's at the passenger compartment and push the exhaust back about to the rear axle. I want to avoid getting it over the rear axle so I don't limit any of my suspension travel. I really just want to get it a couple more feet away from where I sit in the truck. So anyways, like I said, I've got this muffler from O'Reilly's. This one's similar to the Flowmaster mufflers that I've used on some other trucks, but it's just a basic muffler, nothing too fancy about it. And I've got some 2.5-inch exhaust tube. So the Bronco's got 2.5-inch exhaust already on it, so this is going to fit really well, kind of keeping it 2.5-inch the whole way through the entire system. So to start, I've got this, and I just laid it up underneath the truck, and I measured that I need a 12-inch piece of tube to go from the cat to where I want to place this exhaust kind of up on the frame rails out of the way. So let's cut down a piece of tube, and then we're going to start by welding it to this. That's going to be the very first thing we do, is I want to get that tube in place so that then I can go mark for the hangers, and then we can figure out how the actual exhaust and the tip is going to go. But we'll get to the tips and all that kind of stuff here in a second. So let's cut down a piece of 2.5-inch exhaust tubing down to 12 inches and then weld it onto this muffler. Okay, so the first thing you got to do when you're doing any exhaust is you have to grind down and smooth off whatever finish is on these things. So this is like a galvanized type material, maybe not exactly galvanized, but it's got some kind of a coating on it. You don't want to weld through that. It's not good for you, and it's also not good for having a good clean weld. So you got to do it on both ends. You got to do it on the muffler end as well as on the tailpipe end. So this is the inlet, so that's what comes off of the motor, goes into the muffler, and then it's an outlet. Almost all mufflers, I've never found one that's not marked. So like this one has a stamp on it that literally says inlet on one side so that you can't mess this up. The way I like to do this is, instead of cutting this pipe down initially, I like to put it in there and install it and then cut it down. The reason for that is all of these inlets are a little different. You don't quite know how far this is going to go inside of the inlet, and so in order to make sure I get the right measurements and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to install this first, weld it, and then I'll come through and I'll chop it and cut it to the right measurement so I know I've got the right size. So for this, it's as simple as you can imagine. A 2.5-inch pipe fits into this, kind of like so. Easy enough. And now you just come through and weld it. And I actually need to pull this back off again because I didn't grind far enough down. So I'm going to have to pull this back off again and grind up another 2 inches or so to get this enough clearance. So let me take this out, grind this down, and then we'll weld up this pipe if this wants to come out. When doing exhaust, obviously exhaust tube is really thin, so you got to turn your welder down pretty low. I had my Miller-Matic set to about 20 gauge, and that seemed to work. The very first one I did, I had it at 18 gauge, and that was starting to burn through a little bit. So you have to keep your welder down really low, but if you are a novice or if you're just learning, this is a good first project to do, I think personally, unless you want to build like a propane heater cart or something random like that. But It's relatively easy to weld. You can do most of it on a bench, so don't be afraid of trying to do something like this if this is one of your first couple of projects that you're starting off as you're learning to weld or whatever. But we've got this end all finished up. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go mock it up on the truck. So I wanna get as much of this made inside the shop as possible, specifically like the tailpipe section and the part that goes out the back, so that I don't have to do a lot of overhead welding on the truck. So I am gonna have to do some of it, there's no way around it, but to get this piece to fit to where the tube is already, I'm gonna have to do some overhead welding, and I'm gonna have to do my best to hopefully not get any exhaust leaks. Now there's already a couple of them in the truck, it's not completely perfect, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to avoid dropping the entire exhaust, because I guarantee you the bolts are gonna strip out because it hasn't been removed before and it's a 30-year-old truck. So I promise those bolts are not going to come off very easily. Exhaust bolts are notorious for stripping or breaking and things like that. So I'm trying to leave it all in place if I can. So we're going to do some overhead welding and we're going to do our best to get the whole thing. So I'm going to go outside and go mock this up on the truck and go see what we got to do for that back tailpipe section. Okay, so after going out to the truck, I actually don't think I need anything more than just this right here. So we've got the 12-inch pipe that comes off of the existing, the little bit of pipe that's on the cat, to the muffler, and then I was gonna go even farther back, so I actually have a whole nother 2 feet of tube. I was gonna go farther back, but when I started looking at it, I noticed that it would start to get in the way of the axle. So the farther back I went, I would then also have to go like big hoop over the axle, another big hoop to avoid the fuel cell. So I'm just gonna dump this in front of the axle, but it's gonna get it farther back away from the passenger compartment, so this is gonna work just fine. So like I said, we got the 12-inch piece of 2.5 to the muffler, and then we've got just a really simple turn down here. This is one of the ones you can just buy at any part store, you know, to keep them on the back wall there. So it's just a off-the-shelf turn down. Super easy. It's going to turn it down. It's going to get the exhaust fumes away from the passenger compartment, which is what I really want. And then it's going to dump it a little bit farther back, you know, another 2 feet farther back away from the passenger compartment. So this is going to do perfectly fine. So I'm going to weld this up real quick, and then we've got like another half hour of daylight. So I'm going to try to get this welded and then take it out to the truck and really quickly weld this onto the truck before I lose daylight. So I'm gonna just fast forward a little bit and try to get some of this done. So as you guys can see behind me, it is just starting to get dark. I just barely got the thing welded into place, but it is welded, it is finished. I'm gonna take you guys outside real quick before it gets too dark where you can't see underneath the truck anymore, and then we'll turn it on and listen to it run, but it might be too dark by then. So let me take you guys outside real quick. All right, so it's definitely getting dark. Got all the trucks there. I just got the injectors for that in the mail, so tomorrow I'll probably install the injectors on that. But for now, we're working on this. So, sorry I haven't cleaned up yet. Kind of a mess. And I know it's really hard to see down here. Let me grab a light. But that is the exhaust. So you can see there we have the cat, and then we just did a short exhaust over to there, and you can see where it dumps on there just in front of the axle. The only thing I don't like is it barely clears the drive shaft, like barely clears it by about 2 inches, but it should be fine. It's a rear axle, so it shouldn't really be going too crazy. And that's what that looks like down there. I'm pretty happy with it. It was kind of a pain, obviously, welding overhead, but I got lucky. There was an exhaust hanger up front there. See if I can crawl you guys in here a little bit. There's an exhaust hanger up above this already from OEM, so we've got that, and it was easy to weld to hold this into place. You can see this is the welds that we did on the table, and then kind of back here you can see really ugly. I'm going to put some silicone sealant back there, some high temp sealant, and I've got to come through and paint this still, but this is what that looks like. Let's turn it on. Kind of a mess in the shop still. Like all things, just everything is a huge mess all the time, but it is what it is. Oh yeah, got new Mexican blanket to cover the front seat. Makes the whole inside look really nice. But let's get in here. Put this. All right. Let's see if she wants to start. I haven't diagnosed why my battery likes to die yet, so gotta play with that a little bit. There we go. Starts right up though. Let's see. All right, it wasn't too terribly hard of a project, but that's all finished up. Let's talk about what's next. All right, so with the exhaust done, I've got a couple little tiny projects, little small things to button up that I'm not going to do a video on, so I'll do a couple small things, and then I don't know what the next big project is going to be on the Bronco. I've got to paint it at some time, and I've got to do the secondary solar electrical system. I think I'll probably do the solar electrical system first, so stay tuned for the next video. It's going to probably be doing a solar setup on that 1994 Bronco. Anyways guys, exhaust is super easy. It's a fun video to do. It's a fun project to do as well. It doesn't take a whole lot of specialty tools. Just a welder and a grinder is all you need to do a decent exhaust setup. But like you said, that wasn't too bad. The only really annoying part of that is when you have to weld overhead. If you're underneath the vehicle, if you didn't take the whole thing apart and you've got to do all that welding overhead underneath it, it's not ideal, but it's kind of just a part of doing this type of work. So I hope you guys like this. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one.